Okay, and what about the last album then? In terms, was that exercising some ghosts in some ways of just making sure you got the stuff out, like in terms of the old lyrics of the man himself?
I think we were kind of honouring a kind of tacit contract with Richie. I mean,
Yeah.
he left us those lyrics shortly before he disappeared, and it kind of became obvious to us that he planned that disappearance. So, and over the years, it became obvious, why did he leave us these lyrics? And it became apparent to us over the years that that we had to do something with them, and on a selfish level, it was a chance for us to be in the band with Richie just one more time.
Yeah. And did you feel the time was just right, like a good 14 or 15 years had passed, or certainly 13 years, and we can do it now, like the dust had settled, if you like?
I suppose so. I mean, kind of like I mean, the first time we started kind of going through the lyrics, I think we were kind of a wee bit scared of them because, once you start reading those lyrics, it puts a lot of things into context.
Yeah.
And so for years and years and years, it would be like the book in the drawer that you were kind of a bit scared of. But it was just like an idea whose time had come, basically. I remember getting the kind of lyrics out just after we got the NME award. Yeah,
For the greatest godlike geniuses.
Yeah, and I remember getting the lyrics out, and for the first time, I just started getting musical ideas to them when I was reading them. Wasn't scared of them anymore. And they didn't present a challenge, they presented an opportunity to be in the band with Richie again. So it was a complete kind of like, sea change in terms of the way the lyrics made us feel, which presented us with the opportunity to actually do it.
But because a lot of it was A4 sides, kind of notes or whatever, you had to condense stuff down. Do you ever feel you mightn't have got certain stuff right? For instance, like William's last words, you did have to put that right down. Do you ever feel as though, okay, maybe this is not actually what he meant because he hadn't finished this? And
I don't know. That's kind of like really interesting way of looking at it. I mean, like you definitely right with the fact that William's last words was a lyric that was one of the lyrics in the booklet that was definitely took on the form of quite, erudite and long prose, and they had to be edited down to a lyric. But I'd had experience of just like editing a lot of Richie's lyrics down in the past with the Holy Bible. Songs like Yes, there were at least like 5 lyrics from 5 verses from Yes that never got used on the album. And he was around for that process, and he was very, very kind of like, comfortable with that process of the music finding the best words. And you begin, because the music, the lyrics give you the cadence and the rhythm to the music sometimes.
Right, yeah.
So he was very, very familiar with that process from songs like Faster, Yes, even Motorcycle Emptiness. So kind of I knew that had gone on the band before, and I was comfortable with that when we were doing Journal for Plague Lovers.
so is that it then? In other words, have those journals now been used up, and it's onwards and upwards with this current album? In other words, is Richie's stuff now, I'm not going to say have ghosts been exorcised or whatever, but is it gone?
Well, kind of like, there's a bit of a kind of like a, some people have, said, oh, does that give you closure? And like, for me, that's just a notion that comes out of people watching The Sopranos too much. As much as I loved it, I think it's a bit of an American idea that you can get closure on everything. You can't. We did it because to honour our commitment to Richie and, like I said, to make music with him one more time. But it doesn't give you closure or anything like that. It doesn't lay a ghost to rest or any of those phrases. I think you just do it and you accept the experience for what it is. But, I'd like to go on record as saying there were lots of stuff left over in that booklet. And for me, I would never want to put music to them.
Right.
Because we picked the lyrics that lent themselves to music. The rest in there just cannot be used as music, I think.
Could it be used, or would it be too tacky as kind of page poetry, like a poetry book of some sort, or musings? No?
I'm not sure, really. I don't know. I mean, kind of like, I just feel as if we've kind of done that, but within the guise of an album. It was called Journal for Plague Lovers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And there's stuff remaining in that booklet. I wouldn't say it makes me feel uncomfortable, but I don't know what it makes me feel. And therefore, I just have no notion as to what could be done with it.
Okay, well, you're going to give us another one on guitar in a few minutes. No, not just yet, because I'm going to play one off the album now, which is Postcards from a Young Man. In other words, is the title of the album. This is the current single that we've been playing over the last few weeks, just about every single night. Here it goes. This is Manic Street Preachers. There you go, music of Manic Street Preachers. That's the current single. Postcards from a Young Man is the album, of course. And we're going to take one from James live in a second or two. But just before we do, let's take a look at this album itself. As I say, Ian McCulloch is there. John Cale is there, Auto Intoxication.
Yes.
Come on, you must have said, we want John Cale in an album. Oh, I know why. He's Welsh.
No, at all. I mean, kind of like that happened, that kind of like hallelujah kind of like, experience happened when I was 15 years old, when I was listening to White Light, White Heat.
Right.
And I listened to a track off it called The Gift, where there's a voice that narrates the story all the way through that track. And like, the 20th time I was listening to it, I realised, Jesus, this is a New York band, but that's a Welsh accent kind of thing. And then I realised that John Cale was Welsh. And, you know, kind of like, and that was a big thing to us when we were young. A Welshman had been in the coolest band in the world.
Yeah.
But no, I'd got to know John since I'd worked with him in like around about 1998, 99. And I've got to know him, kind of got to know him down the years and worked with him a couple of times. And, you know, back then when I realised that, you know, John Cale was like, you know, a Welshman, and I got into all his solo stuff when I was younger.
Oh, Fear and Slow Dazzle.
Fear.
Fantastic album.
Well, for me, it's Fear, definitely.
Fear.
And
Buffalo Ballet is fantastic on that.
Paris 1919.
Paris 1919
that's the one
is
for me.
one of the greatest, yeah.
You know,
absolutely.
so kind of like, yeah, I actually appreciate John for more what he does as a solo artist than what he did with the Velvet Underground now. But like asking him was a scary experience because, you know, I mean, you know, John is still a proper artist. Some days when you're talking to him, the sun can shine, and other days perhaps it doesn't.
I must dig out that Half Past France is on that, isn't it?
Half Past France, yeah. Which I watched
song.
him play that in Cardiff last year.
Really?
He did the whole of that album. Half Past France is my favourite track off that.
Oh, it's brilliant. Yeah. Okay, sorry, where was I now that we're on John? Oh, yeah, might as well go to one more guest on the album, which is Duff.
Aye.
Were you a Guns N' Roses fan?
I was a gigantic Guns N' Roses fan.
Everybody was. Yeah. I saw Axl playing on stage
massive.
last week, and he stormed off in a huff after 20 minutes.
No, but Duff McKagan was just one of the biggest gentlemen I've ever met in the music industry. And like, you know, as Hunter S. Thompson's famous quote about the record industry, you know, there's rape, pillage and bloodletting in the music industry, but there is a downside.
There is a downside.
And kind of like, it's kind of, you know, Duff McKagan is the upside. He's just one of the nicest people I've ever met. And he talked about the philosophy of playing the bass low down towards your knee and stuff, and just still got that little rock and roll spark in him.
That's very good. By the way, just as a matter of interest before, like, I mean, it's Manic Street Preachers now and has been for the last few years, but there's been stuff in the middle. Tell us about Shirley Bassey. the
I know,
performance.
I mean,
what was
kind
it
of
called? The Girl from Tiger Bay?
The Girl from Tiger Bay, yes. I mean, kind of, you know, David Arnold, who's done a lot of work in the James Bond films and stuff, he was actually producing that record, and I think he got to the end of making that record and he realised that there were no Welsh songwriters on the record, and so he probably called us, and Sarah Phonics and I managed to answer the call first, I suppose. I don't know which way it went round. But yeah, I mean, I'm a resident in Cardiff, and it just felt as if we could write that song. Felt as if we could actually connect to, you know, the Cardiff that used to be, because, you know, parts of Tiger Bay, which is like, you know, Boot Town and stuff, you know, still exist, and it just felt as if, you know, we couldn't turn that opportunity down to have her sing one of our songs.
Could you have turned the opportunity down to do a solo album? Because, I mean, you did do the Great Western, and there's been other solo albums from the Manics. Was that a good idea?
I don't know. This kind of. I don't know if it's a good idea, really. I don't know if somebody is indelibly connected to a band, because the story that we all grew up with each other and we've known each other since we were born and all that kind of stuff. Can somebody ever leave that band, that gang, and become a solo artist? I think it's a valid question. But I did that record because we took an enforced 2-year break. And I'm an institutionalized musician. Yeah,
you got to keep doing it. Okay, well, listen, before you give it the track, I'm going to get away from music for 1 second and say, like, you know, if we mention the leftist stance or whatever, or all the stuff that was on the album covers, or all the Raging Against the Machine stuff that you've done down through the years, or the establishment, whatever, what do you make of the Cameron Clegg alliance and the current Miliband brothers race for the Labour leadership? I mean, is the left, as we know it, is it dead?
Well,
did New Labour kill it?
I think New Labour might have killed it to a certain degree, because, like I said, you know, we shouldn't be talking about stuff like this, but
you might as well throw one in. It's Manic Street Preachers, for God's sake.
Well, the deep irony is that kind of like New Labour kind of said that you couldn't interfere with markets. That was their mantra, and it came from the Bank of England and all that. So, you know, D-side steel workers, car manufacturing, so many things. They said, please help us like they do in France and bail us out. And they went, no, we cannot interfere with the markets. And then as soon as the white-collar world, you know, the banks said, please bail us out, they said, okay, we'll bail you out. So you have the deep irony of Labour just saying, blue-collar man, get out of here. White-collar man, okay, we will bail you out. And I understand why they had to bail the banks out, because if they didn't bail the banks out, we would have all been messed up. But, you know, who would ever thought it would, you know, would have turned out like that? That kind of like the promise that my dad had when he was young, that he could turn his kind of like, that he could turn, like, you know, his ideas into a kinetic ability. You know, my dad wanted to use his hands, that's why he became a carpenter and a roofer. And they destroyed that ethic in people. You know, and Labour, I think they destroyed the manufacturing base in Britain, and I never thought that would have happened. And that's just deeply depressing to me.